and welcome to our fourth Future Endeavours workshop. I'm Hannah Lord and I work at Flying Fish Studio in Sheffield, and we'll be combining art with science today to create some rustic looking decorations. Okay, so here's just a few examples of what you might like to create. There's a moon here as well, so they can be hung on your wall or wherever you'd like them to be. And for this workshop we'll need some plain flour, some salt and some water. That's pretty much it. You will have the option of using other materials as well. So you'll need a chopping board or some kind of work surface to work on. You'll want a measuring jug, some spoons, some cookie cutters. You'll also want a rolling pin, and then optional, I've got some coffee here, no sugar or milk, just coffee granules which have dissolved into some hot water. So to make this, you basically just make a cup of coffee, so put like a spoonful of coffee granules in. I just used some instant coffee and then added some boiling water, and then I let it cool down. You might need an adult to help with this part because we are using boiling water, so we can just pop that in there and then leave it to cool. We need to make sure it's cool before we use it, so you can leave it to cool for a while just at room temperature, or you can put it outside and it'll cool even faster. And then we'll also want some like coffee granules, so this is just instant coffee, or some ground coffee. So this is a type that you might put in a cafetiere. Okay, some ground coffee here. Okie dokie. So once you've got everything together, we're going to start by making our mixture. So it's going to look something like this. I've just wrapped this up into some cling film, because if you don't use it all today, you can save it to do some more decorations the next day or the following day. Just make sure it's airtight, so that's why we've got the cling film around it, otherwise it'll dry out. So the quantities that we'll need to make these are, for every 1 lot of this plain flour, we need half the amount of salt and half the amount of water. Okay, so I'm going to use a cup for this, but if you want to measure it in mil, then you could. So say for example you did 100 ml of flour, you'd want 50 ml of salt and 50 ml of water. So this creates quite a lot of dough. So I'm just going to add this to my measuring jug. And although we are using a lot of ingredients that you would normally use in baking, these are definitely not edible. They wouldn't taste good, and also they're not good for you. So they're definitely just for making decorations with. And then we're going to need half a cup of salt. This makes it a nice gritty texture. So this type of salt is just the type, normal table salt, the type that you might put on your chips. Okay, so I'm going to add this. And then what we have is we have a choice. So it might be that you'd like to use some cold coffee, and that will give it a really nice brown rustic colour to your clay. So this one here, I've used some coffee in mine. This one here, I haven't used any coffee, so there's a slight difference. This is a darker one, okay? So that's up to you, or you can just use just normal water, okay? So either one that's been coloured with coffee and you've let go cool, or just plain old water. And we're going to put half a cup of this in. It's always good to start with a little bit less water, because we can always add more. So I'm going to start with about that much. And I'm going to pour this in here. Now, when we add the water, you'll see it starts to form almost like a dough texture, because there are two major proteins in flour. And what happens is when the water is added to the flour and mixed, the proteins absorb the water, and that's called hydrating. Hydro or hydro, that always refers to something that's to do with water. So like hydroelectricity is electricity using water. So this is hydrating the flour. And what happens is when the flour is hydrated, the protein molecules, the protein combines to make gluten, and it's the gluten that makes it all stretchy and elastic. Okay, that's how you get that like doughy texture, because the proteins have combined to make this glucose. So I'm just going to add a little bit more coffee. See if that's any good. Of course, if it gets a little bit too wet, then you can just add some more flour and some more salt. I think that's about right. Okay. Sometimes the flour gets at the bottom, you just have to get those little bits out. So I'm going to roll up my sleeves for this, because we're going to be doing a bit of kneading of this mixture now. Okay, so knead it all together. So if you like the smell of coffee, you might like this experiment / art project. I love the smell of coffee, so this is a really nice project to do. For those of you who've just joined now, welcome, it's lovely to see you. These are the types of decorations that we're making today, some really rustic looking decorations. You can do what shape or texture you'd like. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. Okay, so I'm just kneading this through. Okay, and now I've got this nice colour. I'm going to do half of it. I'm going to add just some of these coffee granules, the type that you'd make instant coffee with. I'm going to be adding these into the mixture, and that way you get really nice, like a speckled effect. So this one here, okay, has the coffee granules in, the instant coffee. You can also use ground coffee, and that's where you get these smaller speckles. These actually were both done just using water rather than the liquid coffee, so that's why these are a bit paler than this one here. Okay, so I'm going to do half with the instant and half with the ground. So I just made a little dip inside here, and I'm just going to knead this coffee into the mixture. Now if you wanted to do it all at the beginning in your pot, you can just add the flour, add the salt, add the water or the liquid coffee, and you can add these either coffee granules, the instant coffee, or you can add the ground coffee at that same time. It won't dissolve because your water is cold, okay? So, well, it may dissolve, but a teeny weeny little bit. The reason why when we make a cup of coffee, the coffee dissolves is because when water's really hot, the water molecules are moving around faster and bumping into each other faster. And then there are more collisions between the water molecules. And so between the water molecules and between the water molecules and the coffee granules, okay? So imagine almost like a snooker table. You've got loads of balls whizzing around, so loads of molecules whizzing around, and there are more collisions between the water molecules and the coffee granules, and this breaks up the coffee granules, and then the molecules get dispersed within the water and they get dissolved, okay? So that's how you dissolve the coffee in hot water, but it doesn't happen when you add it to the cold water, and it just gets left as these lovely little specks, because it's not moving. The water molecules aren't moving around as fast. Of course, the water molecules aren't moving around at all now, but if you added it in here at the start, then that's why they don't dissolve. Okay, so I've got some little specks in here. I'm now going to add my ground coffee into this other one, see which one I prefer. Lovely smell. Okay, and then I'm just going to knead this into my mixture. And then once we've, oh wow, it's popped out the other end. It's lovely. And then once we've kneaded both these in, we'll be able to make our decorations. So if we get our cookie cutters at the ready, and even if you've just got, say, a circle, actually a circle can create lots of different shapes. It can be stretched to make this kind of oval shape, or you can make a moon shape by cutting out a circle and then slicing out that little section there, and then you're left with the moon. So even if you've just got one shape, you can create lots of different shapes from that. So I've got my 2 lots of mixture. Okay, that one and then that one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my rolling pin, and I'm just going to roll it out. You might find that the instant coffee gives a really nice kind of smudges almost. Gives a really nice effect. Okay, smudges throughout the mixture. So I'm just rolling this out to the thickness that I want, a nice even thickness. So I've got mine a few millimeters. These will take a couple of days to dry. You can just leave them inside at normal room temperature. They'll just dry naturally over a few days. Obviously, the thinner that you have them, the less time they'll take to dry, but also the more delicate they'll be. So I'm going to choose a section that I like. Use my cookie cutter to cut out that shape. Give it a little wiggle. If you have any questions at all, please do feel free to comment, or if you have any questions after this workshop, then feel free to get in touch at Flying Fish Studio, either on my Instagram or Facebook page, or you can contact Artcore. Okay, so now I've made my circle, I'm now going to pop a little hole in the top of it, because if I want it hanging like this one, before it's dry, I'm going to want just to put a little hole in it. So all I'm going to do is I've separated my fingers a little bit, and about 1/2 centimetre from the edge, I'm just going to pop my cocktail stick through, give it a little wiggle. Okay, and there we have our hole at the top. Okay. What we can also do with our pieces is, if you want to give them texture, you can do that now. So before we cut out with our cutter, we're going to add texture. So there are so many things around that we can add texture with, even just like a back of a spoon, for example. This straight edge, we can add texture. So I'm just going to add some texture to my next one. The reason why we add texture now rather than adding it once we've cut our piece out is because if we do it once we've cut our piece out, it's likely to deform the shape. It's likely to, because if you're putting things inside the mixture, it'll push it out a little bit, and so it won't be that nice neat circle that you originally intended it to be. I'm just doing it now so you can see it's made the circle a lot bigger, okay, which obviously I might want, but it's not the shape that I originally intended. Whereas if we're adding texture before we cut it out, which is what I'm doing now, just going to make sure it's covered the whole circle. I'm just going to press it in, and that way you'll get that nice regular circle. Okay. If you're finding that it's sticking to the board, then you can do this on greaseproof paper, so it depends how wet your mixture is. So you can have rolled it out on greaseproof paper, and then that means once you've cut it out, you can then just leave it there so you don't have that peeling off process. Or if you've done it on the chopping board like I have, you can just neaten it up at the end. And I'm actually then going to leave it on this greaseproof paper, it's a bit of a tongue twister that, to dry. And then what I might want to do is after a day or so, the top will have dried, but the bottom wouldn't have. So like on these ones here, you can see that this is the dry section, and then this side is actually still wet, okay? So I've just turned it over, and that means the top, well, the bottom that you've made the top will also dry. So I'll turn it over in about a day or so. Make sure I've put the hole in so that I can hang it. If you want to add things like just little dots with a cocktail stick, then you can do that as well. These almost look like extra coffee granules when you prod them in. You can add this kind of texture after because they don't spread out the clay. They're so tiny. Okay. So there we go, that's one of my pieces. So I'm going to leave to dry, and then you can just use some string or some embroidery thread. You can just, after it's dry, just pop it through, and maybe with a needle, or you might be able to get it through just with your fingers if you've made a big enough hole. And then you can tie a knot, and then you can hang your pieces wherever you'd like to. Really nice rustic effect. Okay. One more thing that I'll show you today is if you would like to marble the clay. So marbling, not clay, I was thinking clay because it almost feels like clay. Marbling this mixture. You can also marble clay, and to do this you get two different types of clay, so of mixture. You get two different types of mixture, and you can just roll it into like a sausage shape. So here's the one that I used the instant coffee with, and then this is the one that I used the ground coffee with. So they're slightly different. If you want two which are really, really different, then you can make a mixture where instead of putting the liquid coffee in, you just pop the water in. So it'll give a paler colour, and so you'll have a paler mixture and a darker mixture. And that way, when we do this marbling, it will show up more. Okay. In fact, I might do that now just to show you the difference. So I'm just going to get some flour. I'm just going to make a tiny bit, so I'm just going to do it roughly. So 2 of these, half the amount of salt. About half, and then some water. I can't use my measuring cup because it's got all coffee in. That's why I'm doing it very rough. Okay, giving it a mix. making that gluten, making it all stretchy and get that nice texture that you might recognise from making bread. Okay, there we go. So I'm just going to knead it a little bit, and then you can see the difference between this clay that I haven't put any coffee in, I've just put normal water in, and then this is the one that I've put both the coffee in, so the actual mixture itself is darker, and then I've also put the instant coffee granules in, so you've got little blobs in there as well. It's got these two, and I'm going to roll it out into a long sausage shape. And then I'm going to do the same with my other one. Okay, and now I've got these two sausage shapes. I'm then going to twist them together. So I'm going to twist, okay, and then form a ball and roll it up. So you can see it's already mixed a little bit. I'm going to do it again. So I'm going to break that in half, make another two sausage shapes, and then same thing, twist them together into a ball. There we go, that's really mixed well now. And then I'm going to roll it out. Personally, I really like this effect. Now my dough is quite sticky, so I am going to do this on some greaseproof paper. Okay, so if I just lift this up to the camera now, okay, you get that gorgeous marbly effect, which I'm then going to choose whereabouts I want my cutter. Okay, so here we are, and I'm just going to make a little hole in the top. Do make sure the hole goes all the way through, so make sure you can see it poking out the end. Give it a little wiggle to make the hole big enough for the thread to go through. And then I think I just want a little dotty pattern all the way around the outside. It may be that if you're making this for someone else, it might be that you think they might like a word written into it, or their initials, or a message for them. You want to keep the message nice and simple because it's a bit hard to write too much on this mixture. So I've done just a little dotty pattern. There we go. And then I'm just going to leave that to dry. And there we go. So that's what you can make, these decorations with just flour, salt and water. And then you can try adding other things as well. So it might be that you want to try adding food colouring. With food colouring, I've found that it really gets everywhere. So rather than food colour, so if you're using food colouring, then make sure that you don't mind if your hands get stained for a little while, and that your work surfaces are really covered well. And same with what you're wearing. Make sure you're wearing stuff that you don't mind getting stained. But another way of making coloured coloured decorations is if you make them and then leave them to dry, and then after they've dried you can give them a couple of layers of acrylic paint, and that works well if you're wanting to colour them. I'm personally going to leave them as they are because I really like the rustic effect that they give with the coffee. But if you have any other ideas of what you can add, then it would be lovely to hear from you. You can just get in touch, and yes, I hope you've enjoyed, and I look forward to our final Future Endeavours workshop next week at the same time. Okay, thank you very much. Bye.